I'm in Poole for Motorboat and Yachting this month, looking at this, which is a used Botnia Targa 37. Now this is one of those classic Botnia boats which is all about function, and the style then comes from that. So this boat actually launched in 1999 and it's remained fundamentally, as far as the styling is concerned, pretty much the same ever since. But in typical Botnia fashion, what has changed is the options and the refinements. So I'm going to take you a walk around this one and explain exactly what I mean. Now this particular boat is only a year old and it's perfect because it has pretty much all of the refinements that Botnia have added over the years. So let's take a stroll around and I shall explain. So when this boat came out, it was launched at the same time as a Botnia Targa 35, which was a very similar boat, obviously just a couple of foot difference. The beam was the same and the layout was pretty much the same. So most people opted for the 35 because it was a bit cheaper, unless they particularly wanted the extra waterline length. This boat came into its own a little bit later on. Now the big news was in 2015 when Botnia started to offer a comfort forecabin. Now originally what you'd have had here is a forward cockpit. So you'd have had seating around here and a steep well that was the same depth as the side decks. And so that was basically your forward cockpit area. The comfort forward cabin is this moulding just here, and that really changes the interior of the boat. We'll go in a moment and have a look. So that was one big difference, but the bigger differences are further aft. So like all Botnia boats, it has these side access doors, so you go into the cabin through here and that takes you straight into the wheelhouse. You can see there's another one by the helm over there. What changed in 2017 is that Botnia started offering a raft of options on the 37 but not the 35, and you can find all of those at the back of the boat here. So one of the things they did was the option of an extended overhang, which this boat has got. As I say, this is a particularly good boat to show you because it has everything. The standard boat would just come to here and then stop. That gives you a little bit more shelter over the door, which is very useful. Also gives you space for a life raft upstairs. But the bigger change was up here, because the original boat had a small flybridge on the trailing edge. So you would just have a couple of seats on the back and a steering wheel, and that was a flybridge. This was the high fly option. It's a much bigger deck up on top of the boat, much more seating, so you can sit 5 people up here, so 2 or 3 across the back, 1 here and 1 here, and then your helm is here. And this again is that extended overhang from the top. You can see this one's had a life raft fitted on there, so that's quite a useful and functional area. But this was a major change, and once Botnia started offering this, the sales of the 37 took off, and suddenly it came out from the shadow of its 35 sister and became the far more popular boat. But there's one more big change that they offered in 2017, and that is, drum roll please, an aft door. So originally that would just be a bulkhead, there'd be a window in it if you want to go into the cabin, or then you're down the sides and into those doors that I showed you. With the aft door option, of course, you're straight in through here. So you've got a cockpit at the back of the boat. You can see there's seating that can be put into these places here. And then from here, you're straight in. And that makes the whole layout a lot more convenient, and it also adds to the airflow. So on a warm day like we've got today, I've got these doors open. I have the door open here at the back, and that makes a big, big difference. Inside the boat, there's another change, and again, happy days, this one's got it. On the original boat, your galley was up underneath here. You'd lift this up, you'd have a 2-burner hob, and you'd have a sink, and then the fridge is underneath the helm seat. The fridge has remained there, but there is now an option, and this boat has it, to put a larger galley here. So you've got a big oven, you've also got your 2-burner hob. Now this boat is all electric. Of course, when the boat was new, you could opt for gas if you preferred. This one's got a generator, so it doesn't need it. And then your sink is also back here as well, of course. This remains the same, and it's classic Botnia with the centre pole, and the Botnia dealers will assure you they've heard all of the pole dancing jokes, but what that is actually for is this table. So you just undo this, slide the table down, that brings it into position. When you're not wanting it, it slides up against the ceiling out of the way. Very practical, very convenient, very in keeping with the ethos of this boat. And the other thing you can change here, this seat, as you can see, gives you forward-facing seating alongside the helm, but you can drop that backrest the other way, and now you've got a much larger dinette area, and of course that sits more people in around the table as well. So that comfort forecabin, well, that is down here. Now if you don't have the comfort forecabin, you still do get the sleeping here, but what you get is just a pair of V berths. With the comfort forecabin, it increases the headroom massively in this area. So by losing that well of the forward cockpit, you gain the headroom as you come into here, and that gives full standing headroom in this cabin, which is great. The other thing that it will do is you can have an option of a double bed in the centre rather than these V-berths. It's own specification when the boat is new. As you can see, this one has an infill, so you can make this to a double bed if you prefer, so that works very well. And there's a little cupboard here for storage, drawers underneath it, and lots of storage then around down here and down underneath here. There's a pretty big locker as well, bedding in there at the moment. And one other big news item for the Comfort 4 cabin is here, because with this you now get a toilet at the front of the boat. Without this option, this doesn't exist. So that's another reason why this is a very popular option. But it's not the only sleeping area on the boat, because if we head back, we will discover that there's a completely separate sleeping area back here. This is the same whatever options you go for, so it's the standard feature of the boat. And what you have down here is a double berth on this side and a single berth on this side. That's quite useful, because it means that if you've got two chaps that don't want to share, for example, then they can use that as a single and that as a single. If you've got a couple that do want to share, well, then you've got this. Also for families, of course, you've got young kids, it's great to have this to put a young child in and then keep the forward separate perhaps two more. So it does give you a lot of options by having that layout. Also in here is the standard heads, and that is at the back. Just in here, it's a little larger than the one that we saw further forward. And you've got a shower area, you can see how those doors close off, like so. So the only thing we haven't really talked about is engines, and they are under the aft deck. And again, a huge amount of choice. Let's lift these hatches up and I will show you. Now, it's part of the practical ethos of this boat that everything is so easy to get at. So for these, they just lift up on gas struts, and suddenly you can get to everything. Now this has the most powerful engine option. This is actually a particularly good specification boat. So these are IPS 600, so they're a pod drive, and you can see the top of the pods just down here. These engines are 435 horsepower each, and they're giving the boat a top speed up around 40 knots. It's a real flying machine with these engines. Now they offered IPS in 500 and 400 versions, and those are 370 and 300 horsepower each, if my memory serves me correctly. But they also did the boat with outdrives, so you'd have the engines back here, outdrives on the back of the boat, and that is of course what all the earlier boats had before the IPS came out, because this boat in its inception predated IPS. Those are still available. They're D6 engines, and they're typically 310, 370, or the latest 400 horsepower. In fact, I think they're doing 440s now as well. There's also a D4 option, and they were 300 horsepower each, possibly a little light for a boat of this size. They'll still give it 30 knots, but if you want the real banzai performance, then the bigger D6 or these IPSs are clearly the way to go. And of course, being a Botnia Targa, that performance is nothing without control, and the big news always with Botnia boats is the seakeeping, which these are famous for right across the range. So that performance is absolutely tamed by an incredible hull. It's a boat that's still in production, and knowing Botnia it will be for another 50 years, because these really are a form over function design. They won't style these, they just are exactly what they are. So that's why you've got the big forward sloping screens, for example, with an amazing view out. It's very much a Botnia feature, that what they do is what works. So there you have it. Very practical, a very innovative layout, and some useful options on there as well. But if you're looking for a seriously practical offshore machine, these are well worth taking a look at.